Great. Thank you, Diana. Great. Thank you so much, Diana. All right, folks. So exciting topics to cover here. And we got a lot of content to cover. I think you guys will enjoy what we have put together. The net here is that we're going to be talking about three different things. One is the future of testing with AI and how that's impacting. Second, we're going to showcase Autopilot and how you use it with PeopleSoft and some of the other applications, as well as I'm going to have Amit talk through a SAP implementation, the testing project, that program he went through, he led, and present that case study and some of the best practices that he employed. So with that, let's just start with some introductions here. So my name is Faraz Syed. A little bit about my background is that I've been in testing, DevOps, software development for about 25 plus years. Started working with Mercury products initially back in 99, 2000 time. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to work for Hewlett-Packard as a CTO, as well as CA Technologies, where I led their DevOps and quality engineering practice for North America. Today, I have Chris Emerson with me here and Amit as well. So let's start with Chris. Chris, if you want to quickly introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Faraz. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Emerson. I, too, started off after a stint doing development work, working with the Mercury interactive tools, then on to HP, doing performance testing, test management, test automation, and continued to do some development work. Then I also worked in the open source testing world, so I've kind of seen both sides of the coin and both approaches to test automation. And I've been doing automation for going on 20 plus years now. So it's good to have you all here today. Excited to show you what we have to offer.
Thanks, Chris. Amit.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Amit Tiwari. I am been in the industry for last 23 plus years and have seen many tools around automation and testing. So you guys can understand like how the legacy things are changing to more on the AI way of doing the test automation. And that is what we are here for, to present and share. But been involved in many kind of ERP implementations and know the value of testing in such scenarios and even within the enterprise applications, upgrades and everything else. So we'll share some of the stories, what we have learned, and probably also showcase some of the demos.
Great. Thank you, Amit. Again, let me quickly recap here. We're going to talk about Autopilot, go into Salesforce, and we'll talk about SAP. What I would love for you guys to do is please mute yourself. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. And at the end of it, around 1:50 or so, in about 45 minutes, I'll open it up for Q&A and leave 10 minutes at the end. We'll try to answer your questions on the chat as much as possible, but at the end, you can unmute and ask the question. So with that, let's get started. So, when I think about AI and really, look at the last 30 years of testing, where we started with test automation back in like mid 90s to mid 2000s, it was a heavy developer centric domain, right? You had to have programming languages, programming language experience. You had to know coding. You had to know a little bit about databases. So things like that, right? Over that period of time, things have evolved. And I want to say like about last decade or 15 years, low code, no code solutions have become pretty prominent. And as this evolution is happening in the testing industry, I feel like we're going through a major paradigm shift today, right? If you look at I think this particular picture on the screen kind of illustrates itself, is that testing is not easy. And it's sometimes not a fun job, right? So it feels like, you're lifting a cube. Now, with Gen AI in last year and a half or so, the game has changed quite a bit, or is changing. And as I've talked about that paradigm shift, kind of moving from your traditional test automation to the future of testing. And that's where there are a number of new cases related to generative AI that fit into the automation and specifically in testing space. And I'm going to talk about some of those use cases as we go along. So first, I want to set the context here in terms of what's going on, right? The current state today, again, heavy code, low code, future state. We want AI to help us augment our capabilities. and make things faster, better, cheaper, and improve our lives in the process. So, you know, I don't think it's a secret. I mean, everyone in this call probably knows, and last year and a half, there's been, last I want to say 4 years, there's been significant investment in AI. I dabbled into AI outside of testing back in 2018, 2009, in a contact center space. And at that point, we were looking at doing speech analytics. So we built a product, this company that I work for. Today, that capability is table stakes. Everyone has it. You can use Amazon services, you can use Google services, Microsoft, to do a lot of that heavy lifting, so you don't have to develop, you know, your own solutions. And that's really what's happened. Is there has been a significant amount of investment. There has been significant amount of disruption in the way we do things, and also the expectations and outcomes are changing. Some of the metrics that you see here on the screen, the global AI market is going to be about $300 billion by 2026. That's huge. If you look at testing itself, you're talking about $50 billion industry, right? That's the market share. And there are companies that I'm working with, Fortune 500 companies. They have committees set up. They are exploring how to use this new technology and, again, leverage that to improve the bottom line, improve the customer experience, improve the employee experience. Now, there's a study that Boston Scientific did. It's a consulting group, sorry, not Boston Scientific, that's a customer. Boston Consulting Group. It's a very large consulting company. And what Boston Consulting Group did, BCG, is they did a survey and a research with their employees with about 750 to 800 consultants, right? And they split that into two groups. One that was using ChatGPT or GPT, one that was not using GPT. And they were asked to do the similar type of things. The end results were striking and not surprising, right? So the people that leverage ChatGPT had 12% more productivity. They were able to complete more tasks, and the quality of their outputs and their the outputs that they generated was significantly in a higher quality. Now, that's the kind of operational efficiencies that we're looking for. AI is not here to replace us. It's really here to augment us and what we do. And that applies to testing itself. Here are some reports from Gartner, IDC, Forrester, and everyone is very high on it, right? I mean, Forrester, talks about how firms are looking at AI to increase their test automation. Traditionally, if you look at test automation itself, it requires a lot of resources. It can be intensive in terms of resource intensive. So leveraging AI to reduce the pain in those areas is what these analysts are talking about. Now, how does all this kind of fit into the context of UiPath, right? So UiPath, obviously, folks on the call know that we have a product called Test Suite. Test Suite is a test automation solution. We recently released generative AI capabilities with it, which we're going to talk about. It's called Autopilot. But before I get into that, let's kind of set the context here a little bit in terms of how all these things kind of work together and what is our perspective from UiPath perspective. Like, unlike, I'm not going to name any names, unlike our competition in the market, what we have seen is that the companies out there are not organically growing AI as part of their product. They're buying companies and they're putting AI on top of it, right? And the challenge with that is that sometimes these technologies, the way they're designed, do not work properly. Now, if you look at UiPath, we have been on this AI journey since, I want to say 2017, 18 timeframe. And the way we kind of approach this from UiPath perspective is really three pillars, right, that you see on the screen. First, we talk about the specialized AI models. These are basically AI capabilities, like, for example, intelligent object identification, computer vision. We talk a lot about that, document understanding. So those are basically your types of AIs that you can bring. Then we allow you to have your own AI models, whether you can host it on AI Center, and you can host them on AI Center and do drag and drop and bring it into Studio. And the third is that we integrate with all the common cognitive AI services that are out there, whether that's Google, OpenAI, AWS. So those are the three key pillars from our side. Now, how do we apply that to the automation? So when you look at the test automation, right in the middle, you're seeing product leveraging either specialized models or Gen AI models, right? There are two different kinds of models. Specialized models are, again, models that we train, so test case generation, test data generation, those are the kind of things we do. Whereas the generative AI models are, readily available that allow you to convert code, do different kinds of tasks. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is that is the corresponding actions. Those actions are done either through a UI, whether through an API or human in the loop. And on the left-hand side is what you're seeing is the input. And this is the most important part because your end results really depend on how good your input is, right? So the documents, communication, any type of context you provide to AI, that's very critical. Now with, trust layer is a common topic. I talk to our customers all the time about it, especially in the Fortune 500 companies in healthcare and life sciences. We see that, people are hesitant, corporations are a bit hesitant to dabble into it. So with that, from UiPath perspective, we have created what we call an AI trust layer. This trust layer actually allows you to control what data is going in and out. You can manage the data up until first name, last name, social security number, if that's a PII number. We also allow auditing and cost controlling. There are governance feature in terms of access and things like that. You can, provide role-based access, content filtering, which is very important. We look for harmful content. And also we have a large language model gateway in order to communicate with certain third-party AIs, like for example, Microsoft or Open, right? So that is very critical. You can control everything possible, have the security layer that provides the governance and security on top of everything. So what is autopilot? I kind of mentioned that, and I'm going to quickly go through this and hand it off to Chris, so he can actually show you all the stuff in action. So autopilot is really a collection of advanced capabilities, AI capabilities that we design for test automation purposes. So some of the use cases that you look at from that perspective is being able to generate your test cases from requirement, generating test data, converting your manual test cases into automation. And I'll cover this in another slide here shortly. Now, I think everyone is familiar with this particular personas that we talk about: developers, testers, business testers, right? Where does autopilot fit into it? Autopilot fits into all those personas and enable them to do different kinds of things. For example, for developers, they can use autopilot to convert their script from manual test case to an automated script. Technical testers can use that to create your test cases, generate, synthetic data. Business testers can use it for example, looking at results, analyzing what really happened with this particular test execution. So AI really, and autopilot is augmenting these different personas. It's not replacing them. Now, when we talk about autopilot, there are 4 pillars we look at it. One is the evaluation, which is really focused on, for example, evaluating your requirements to make sure that the requirements and user stories are written properly. You have the AI-powered generation, which is generating, test cases out of your flowcharts, requirement documents, any documentation you have. So that's part of the generation pillar. Automation is taking that manually generated stuff, converting it into automation, into computer understanding type of logic and scripts, right? And this is where in automation, we provide self-healing, we provide low-code automation, we provide computer vision and all that. And then the third pillar is really around insights. And insights is designed to provide real-time actionable items. A lot of time, we as testers, when we're doing testing, we're collecting a lot of data, and it's kind of hard to correlate information. With the power of autopilot, it does the work for you and tells you exactly what it's seeing in terms of the problem areas and some of the actions you can drive to improve your test execution. These are some of the use cases that that we're talking about. I think most people on the call are aware that the test generation capability is there. It's coded automation today. We are working on the low-code solution, so you'll be able to generate test cases, test scripts from your manual test cases into low-code automation. That is expected to come out this year. In addition to that, you have other areas as well, use cases, for example, generate expressions, text to code, converting your text into code. These are all different use cases, and there are more, significantly more coming out, but this is where we have been focused on as version 1. So with that, I think it's time to kind of look at some autopilot demo and talk about PeopleSoft. So Chris, you want to take it away?
All right, thanks, Faraz.
Sure. Stop sharing my screen.
Okay, let me share my screen quickly here. All right, thank you very much. So yeah, everybody, I want to show you a couple of demos. I want to get right into this so you can see what this really looks like and get into some more detail about a couple of the features that Faraz was mentioning. So in this first example I want to show you, we're going to take a requirement or a user story. It can be either one. And of course, these requirements or user stories can come from other sources. They don't have to be put directly into our test manager module. We can easily synchronize with other third-party lifecycle management tools, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But what we can do once we get those requirements and user stories put into Test Manager is allow you to do some really great things to boost productivity. Instead of having to write from scratch or to take templates and modify those templates over and over again, you can actually use artificial intelligence and a large language model to generate meaningful, correct, descriptive, and complete test cases for different purposes through prompting with documentation that can supplement the requirement, and even through diagrams and screenshots. So this is all designed to boost efficiency and to integrate seamlessly, again, like I said, with your existing lifecycle tools, and then give you the opportunity to even refine those created results. So I want to show you what this looks like in action. We're going to see first going into Test Manager, and we're going to just take a simple example of creating an account in Salesforce. So here we are in the requirements module of Test Manager. There's our requirement. We do have a few documents associated here, and before we do any test generation, we're going to evaluate the quality of this requirement. So this isn't a step that you have to go through. This is optional, but it's something that we added into the process. So in evaluating the quality of the requirement, I can select a prompt, or I could supply my own prompt in that text box. Then when I choose to evaluate the quality of the requirement, I'll get a list of suggestions, and I can choose what I'd like to do with those suggestions. I can choose to actually, first look through them. Then I can actually choose if I want to add any of these to a requirement, or if I want to remove them from the list altogether as I go through the workflow that we can support here, where something can be in work, done, or new. I have all these options, as well as the ability to regenerate those quality suggestions. So next, let's go into creating a test. So I've got a few documents associated with this requirement already, a couple of screenshots, and then I have a couple of text files. So the first one is guidance around creating accounts in Salesforce. The second is data that I want to have included. And you can see at the bottom there, I actually want to add the for Salesforce phrase at the end of each test name. So I instructed in that text file the AI to actually do that for me. So we're going to generate some end-to-end flows. Okay, and those prompts that you saw there are configurable. So you can create your own set of custom-made prompts from that drop-down list inside of the project settings and Test Manager. So you have a lot of flexibility. Now you can see we have 10 test cases generated. That's all I asked for. I could ask for more or less. These are end-to-end test cases given the requirements context. And what I actually did here, again, looking at the test input data, where I asked for Salesforce to be appended to the end of the name, it actually did that. And if you look at some of the other test data, we're going to see this appear again in one of these test cases. And at this point in the process, I haven't really created the test case in my project yet. I'm going to have to look at these and decide which one I want to pull in. So as we can see here, there's the test data. It's actually included in my manual test case. And now if I want to pull these into my project, all I need to do is just check off a few boxes. If I don't like what I have there, I can choose to regenerate it. Once I check these boxes and create tests, they're automatically associated with my requirement. So I don't have to go through any other steps. And now I can view these as these manual test cases, and I can actually make edits to them. And they're now mine to work with. So I've saved a huge amount of time having everything written for me, having each of these steps laid out for me. Okay, so what do we do after this? After you have all of these auto-generated manual test steps, what we can do now is generate automations from these. And this is where it gets really interesting. So the process, which we're going to see in a second here, I've got a video that's going to show how different roles in the testing process can take advantage of this, is we're going to see, again, a boost in efficiency all throughout the use of AI in our test creation process, be it for autopilot for testers, which we just saw in Test Manager, or if it's autopilot for developers, which we're going to see in a minute inside of Studio. The efficiency boost is incredible. I use it all the time in my day-to-day work, and I save 50 to 60% of my time overall. The autopilot for developers tool or feature within Studio gives me the ability right now to work with code for automations, and coming just around the corner in another month and a half or so in October, we're going to have low code automations. And that's what I'm going to show you in this next example. So what we have are, first, kind of a recap, kind of what we just saw. We've got an SAP example where we're going to do the two-way match invoice process. These are some of the documents that are associated here. And as we generate tests using these documents, we're going to see that the context for all of those documents is taken into account in the tests that get generated. So as we flow through this, you can see again, 10 test cases were generated. We can certainly choose more, and we have to go through the same steps. We have to get those manual test cases created. We'll put them into our test project. Okay. So you get to see this happen again. Now what happens is an automation developer can step in and go into, they first will see that there's a new test case that needs to be automated, then they will go into Studio. And in UiPath Studio, they can see those test cases, but first what they have to do is make sure they capture all of the elements that are a part of that test scenario. So using the object repository recording capability, all of the objects from the UI can be pulled in very quickly and given corresponding names. Now those names will line up with references inside of the manual test case. Okay, so that's an important point. The object repository names will match what's in the manual test case. And when the code is generated, AI will automatically match the object repository names with the correct activities and generate a low-code automation. So we can do this with coded automations now, today, and in the very near future, we'll be releasing in our October release, actually, it's going to be the ability to do low-code automations like you would see here. So these are productivity enhancements. The automation may not always be perfect since it's AI-based, but it can do 50 to 80 or 90% of the work for you. And what happens next is just a matter of refining the process. So this part of the autopilot suite between autopilot and testers, and this is autopilot and developers, round out the entire story from building on requirements all the way to automations. So now we run this automation. The automation developer will make sure everything's working, of course. And as we go through this journey, we can see everything is working as expected. And in a case where the enterprise is using autopilot over a period of time, the prompting and the object repository libraries all get built up and get honed to be more accurate and more specific and more useful as prompting and as material for autopilot to be able to generate a finished product. Now, after the test is run, this is where a tester can come in. Someone who doesn't do automation, but they're responsible for test planning. It could be a test manager lead, or it could be somebody who's simply kicking off tests or reviewing results. And this is where we can generate our insights and we can see what's happening in our test scenarios and understand better where we're seeing things like false negatives, failing tests, certain error patterns that may develop, all making the process much more efficient and leading to greater productivity for the people that are in charge of doing the actual work. So how do we make all of this possible? What we have to do is first consider the parts of our architecture. We've got Test Manager, we have Studio for creating the actual automations. So that's where the low-code automation was generated. Test Manager was where the autopilot for testers feature was used to take requirements into manual test cases. And then we have, of course, our orchestrator component, which manages the publishing of automations and synchronizes automations to robots, and also handles scheduling of jobs and input from CI/CD integrations. And then, of course, we have the robots themselves. All of this allows us to automate across multiple different applications. Now, I've got Salesforce centered here, and what I want to point out is Salesforce has many different issues when it comes to automation. There are dynamic IDs and elements. The page layouts can be very complex, leading to nested components that are hard to automate. There can be asynchronous JavaScript or even AJAX, if you go way back. Visual force pages have specific identifiers and properties. And then when you get into some of the Lightning Web components, there may be even a shadow DOM aspect to those. Now, UiPath has native identification for all of these different situations built in out of the box. So we can support everything in the interface. In Lightning, for example, the Lightning interface, we've got specific attributes that we pick up. We also have activities for Salesforce Classic, Salesforce integration service that uses public Salesforce APIs, so you can support Salesforce workflows, and an integration to the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Now, our identification techniques range from native identification to a multi-anchored fuzzy targeting technique, where we can pinpoint items on the screen, elements on the screen that you need to interact with by referencing other elements, and also fuzzy matches to specific properties. We can also include computer vision in that multi-anchor strategy, or we can use computer vision by itself. That's very useful for automating other applications that might be delivered over a Citrix interface, let's say, where you're really just scripting against a bitmap. If you wanted to connect natively with Citrix Elements or VMware or Microsoft Remote Desktop, we do have an executable that can be installed on those servers to support that. And that's what enables us to really span across multiple applications. So in your enterprise test scenarios, you're typically working with multiple applications and trying to exchange information and validate information between them. And that's where UiPath really shines, because we can pull together multiple applications from multiple systems into single test flows. And finally, I just want to go over the types of Salesforce testing that we support. So unit testing is something that's already supported through the Apex dev tools. We support all the other testing that you may be doing. So system testing, regression testing as part of the rollout of new features or integration testing, production testing, of course, if you wanted to do any sort of monitoring, or if you want to repeat any of the system testing that you did, and also, of course, UAT testing. So we can support and accelerate the UAT testing process in certain portions of that process where there may be repetitive tasks. So with that, that's everything I wanted to cover for you today. I'm going to hand this over to Amit now. Amit, I'm going to stop sharing. and you can take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris and Faraz. I think that was an excellent overview around the kind of new generation of the testing tool, and definitely Chris covering the autopilot aspect, how the AI is transforming the ability of testing and kind of molding into a very different space where anybody can build those test scripts. It's not like the business users or probably somebody who is not aware have to wait for somebody to develop those, right? So that's very good to hear, and that's what we are here to share more stories around. And I'm sharing my screen. I hope everybody can see it. So
Yes, we can.
perfect. Yeah. So I think I will be talking more around SAP testing, and that's what I have highlighted. So I mean, took the same slide what Chris had, but instead of Salesforce, the focus area is SAP. And the reason why is, I mean, SAP becomes like one of the popular enterprise applications, which is, I believe, approximately 60 to 70% of the organizations have worldwide, and they use SAP as a primary kind of enterprise applications and the SAP product line, right? So when we look at SAP in this space, and as kind of Chris shared, that the ability of identifying the element on the GUI, either it is your SAP Fury or SAP Thick Client, or even if you go to the success factor testing, you fall in the same category as Salesforce, because there's a dynamic elements, and same thing all like SaaS products have, right? So it does cover really well in identifying those elements during testing, and that's what most important thing when we are testing, that we are able to correctly identify the elements and the input fields, whereas we are able to input the data and kind of read the output. That's kind of main crux of the testing, right? So if I go to the next slide, and I mean, from our experience, what I mean, I've seen is the majority of the challenges which happen with kind of SAP customers on the left-hand side, if you can see, whenever they are doing the implementation, either you are doing kind of implementation or migration, which is could be a greenfield versus brownfield, or if you have already have SAP system, and with nowadays every kind of enterprise want to build and adopt new kind of features being rolled by either by SAP or by integration, or you are trying to build kind of a Fury app on top of your kind of BTP space. There is continuous enhancement into your process, and most important thing is like, okay, how do I continuously test my updates? How do I support my migration to the from ECC to S4? Or even if I talk about the success factors, the same challenge, whereas SAP announced 2 years, I think last year, that in 2 years they will retire the onboarding 1.0, and everybody need to migrate into the newer onboarding HCM system. And that, I mean, those kind of challenges happen, whereas where will be your data going? Where will your kind of process work? How the configuration can be moved out? How do I test, making sure that everything is intact, right? So those are the key challenges which like we have seen our customer base facing whenever they are kind of working around the SAP or probably other application, which is kind of related and probably always integrated with the SAP, right? On the right-hand side, what we found out is like the benefit of RPA-based solutions, which I think UiPath, which you're talking here, is very critical and kind of give a lot of benefit to the organization. And that's the big benefit. Like I mean, I've seen my customer kind of saying, whereas regression testing can be covered really well into your whole process of migration or upgrade or probably kind of implementation. There's a lot of effort saving and effort reduction during those processes, as Chris was sharing that again, how quickly you can build some of those test scripts and probably easily to change based on your implementation process change, I mean, which happens regularly, right? Cost saving and everything else is kind of there. But the most important thing is like the bottom three lines, whereas you get two in a box value, whereas one tool is solving your multiple problems, right? So one tool is, which is UiPath is popular for robotic process automation, whereas it has proven the capability, whereas, I mean, there are millions of robots running the business critical processes. So why not on the testing side, which is more on kind of doing the validation and not even on the production side scenario, right? So that's why like we call it two in a box situation, whereas the customer get benefit on that, whereas one skill set which is needed to be building these automations, either testing or the automation, same skill set is required. It requires mostly common infrastructure side, whereas it doesn't deviate too much versus you need like this license versus that license. So you have common infrastructure on the licensing side. And then probably also kind of value add around the reusability across the automation and test automation, as Chris was saying that, okay, whatever you have built into tests can also be used on the automation side, right? So those are the core benefits which we have seen, and probably majority of the customer where I have interacted kind of either started with the testing and then transition to adopt the automation, and some on the other side as well, where they started from automation and then adopted the testing on the same side. So I just wanted to cover that quickly. But if you look at the SAP ecosystem, and I mean, on the blue swim lane, if you see, starting from your S4 to ECC to BTP to Ariba to Basis, your Concur, SuccessFactor, right? I mean, all these are SAP product line, whereas there is a continuous upgrade into these because SAP definitely want to make sure that it cater the requirement of the users, is cater the requirement of the business, and definitely that require continuous improvement on their application as well, right? So that's what they have been doing. And with all those product lines, I mean, there's always a lot of opportunity with the testing. And if you look at the gray callouts, it tells you that, okay, if you look at the S4 side of story, you during your migration to the S4, there is multiple phases of testing required based on like how your implementation cycle look like. And generally these implementation are easily 1 year to 5 years, depending on like how big enterprise you are. And if you look at that big of enterprise and that big of implementation, you can understand very well that, okay, 30% of time always goes on integration testing and kind of doing the SIT, doing the UAT, doing the unit testing, all of that, right? So that's kind of just one story, but same thing applies to all of the other product line, either kind of ECC, whereas if you're doing upgrades, you can use those. Ariba to SAP ECC integration, there is a gap exists between these two product line, but still you want to make sure that your the information which you are posting from ECC to Ariba or Ariba to ECC, they are in sync, and there's a lot of excellent testing opportunity there, which we have seen our customer using. And same thing on the SuccessFactor. It's a SaaS-based product. SAP kind of releases every 6-month upgrade on these kind of SuccessFactor tenants. And majority of those upgrades are like mandatory for all the customers. So you will have to adopt those into your specific tenant. And before adopting those, you need to do the testing. And that's why like all the HXM kind of resources within your organization will be pulled in to do all the validation on the sandbox, whereas all the upgrades and kind of your business process works well and all, right? And then you kind of publish that update into your production environment. So I mean that can also be very well kind of automated, and knowing that SuccessFactor is generally 100% standard, so there's no customization. So there is a big benefit that, okay, with those changes, I mean, your test script doesn't require a lot of change. So kind of all those solutions around testing can be created. I mean, these are the opportunities, and probably seen how the customer uses. But what we have also seen, like customer using the UiPath as a platform to solve all these problems with building those testing. And the reason kind of Chris already highlighted the benefit of the fuzzy selectors, the benefit of autopilot, the benefit of computer vision, which enables accuracy on the testing, and probably it doesn't break very often compared to the other legacy tools which exist in the market, right? So that's kind of around the type of testing with SAP product line, how people are doing. If I talk very specific about I mean, SAP S4 migration, and probably that's kind of one of the crucial thing, because I think again everybody need to migrate to S4 in next 3 years time frame. That's what I believe SAP has defined a time. And if you look at the standard S4 migration life cycle, there's a multiple phases, whereas wave one, wave two, wave three. But on the right hand side, if you see, right, I mean, there is always multiple UAT required based on like how you have cycled your implementation. For example, like maybe like first you in your organization you want to go live with, or really you want to implement the order to cash process. So whole order to cash process will be tested, and kind of your business will approve that, and that's why like the implementation team will take on procure to pay or record to report or treasury or tax or probably other models of SAP, right? So that's how like different phases are there. But for every phase, you need to validate everything. So either whatever was tested in the phase one, there is a potentially chance that because you are implementing other modules which can be relevant to the previous model which has been already implemented, would require some change. So multiple kind of sprints of testing, multiple waves, and probably require a lot of effort in kind of executing those. And once these test scripts are built at the initial stage, they can be used throughout the process, and not only during the SITs, but I think the UATs can also adopt and use those. But the other benefit is like, I mean, nowadays we know that SAP upgrades happen, and probably once you do complete your implementation, these test scripts are not wasted. I mean, they're always there for you to use as a regression for your upgrades, for your kind of any changes you are potentially publishing into the production, right? So, I mean, multiple ways the same test script can be used. So, what we have seen in general, for example, like if I have to quickly quote the idea of creating a test script on the SAP Word side, if you kind of familiar with it, then you will probably understand really well. Is it is by the bigger process, then the bigger process get divided into multiple transaction codes. And here we have taken example of like the general maintenance, but the general maintenance is again from the step one. There's a create PM notification, to change PM notification, to good received, and then it continues and goes to like auto settlement, right? I mean, that's how like your end-to-end process completes. And that's kind of our standard way of testing is like we kind of write into the Excel our steps, and probably what is the input look like and what is the output look like. So this is kind of showing you like how in general the SAP Word uses the testing from the manual perspective. And this is kind of more kind of better example I will give you, like and probably show you a quick demo as well, whereas you can see and kind of relate things. This is one of the process where procurement of direct materials, so kind of similar, but the idea is the same as what kind of I was trying to explain on the previous slide. So the process start from step number one is like creating your purchase requisitions. And in order to create a purchase requisition number, you will execute a transaction. But at the start, you will provide some of the input fields, whereas like what is my purchase rec type, and what is the material, what is the quantity, what is delivery date, right? What is the plant, and what is the check, or probably something like those kind of information. So these input fields will become your initial input to your process, which you are trying to test end to end. The second step is like creating your purchase order based on the purchase rec which has been already created. But the idea is it will use the output from your step one, and that will become the input in the subsequent step. And then still it will continue to use the existing information which was provided initially. And then probably you'll have the expected results. So once the PO is generated, you will go ahead and probably build, either do the goods receipt, or you do the supplier invoice, and probably multiple steps defined based on like how your organization has kind of defined for this process, right? But the idea is like, if whenever we are talking about end-to-end process testing, I mean, it generally goes from 30 steps to 120 steps easily, depending on like where you are starting and where you want to go. And if you want to test that whole thing, your test data, which need to kind of go through that whole cycle and kind of work in that direction, right? So this was one quick example, but maybe let me show you a quick demo as well. with the UiPath, and this is kind of being running directly from the studio, whereas the test script has been built, but now I think you will see quickly it will launching the SAP GUI, which is part of the SAP ECC. This is from the ECC. Chris showcased one example of the Fury, and this is kind of your tech client ECC. So now, based on the input fields, it is creating a purchase rec number and kind of input all the details required to create the purchase rec. And once that get created, you will see a green dot at the bottom as you know the document number generated. So that first step is complete. Now it has output as part of the first step. Now it will go and create the purchase order based on that purchase rec, and it already have the purchase rec number from the step number 1. So it will use that purchase rec number and pull that purchase rec information to either convert into PR to PO, or maybe create the PO based on the purchase rec which has been already defined there, right? So it creates that, and then once the process is complete, you will again get the document number, and then it will go ahead and continue to do the goods receipt for you. And it will use the same purchase order number to post the goods receipt. And once it does post the goods receipt, the final step would be like maybe creating a supply invoice, right? Or maybe like doing something else, and maybe billing after that. Or if you have in between the step of kind of delivering a package or probably packaging from the warehouse or something like that, maybe you can include those as well into that process. But the idea of explanation is like your end-to-end process when you're testing very well covered, and it is able to kind of navigate really well and identify all the elements within the SAP ecosystem and all right. So I'll pass through quickly, and this is where like it is now creating the invoice based on the goods receipt which was posted correctly, and that's where kind of the process ends, right? And then at the end, you can see that the result has been populated into Excel. I mean, that's what like our older way, but in case your business still want those information, the automation can do that. It can populate an Excel and can email that Excel to the business so that they are able to validate those things the way they are used to. But there's always a better way, which is by the test manager. And probably Chris shared a quick glimpse of test manager as well during his demo. So so that was like one quick presentation around the process, which does exist within the SAP. But similarly, it's not only limited to one enterprise application. And in this particular process, we are talking about end-to-end process test automation, whereas the process start from lead to opportunity, whereas your lead management and opportunity exists into the Salesforce. Then it goes to the quoting, which is again Salesforce CPQ, you are using that. Then it goes on the ordering side, and then probably in the ordering, it is going to the SAP where you're ordering, your delivery, your invoicing, and then licensing as part of the SAP. So you can kind of define that whole end-to-end steps. And that's what I was talking about. Like, I mean, some of the process could be like 30 steps end-to-end, but there is always kind of bigger processes like this one, where it can be easily 120, 130 steps for you when you are testing, right? So it's an example. And this is another example from like one of the customer, whereas they had kind of their whole SAP setup was depending on the way their kind of subsidiaries were set up. But for every subsidiaries, it was required to set up a company code and the plant. But I mean, we know that in the SAP world, when you are creating company code or you are creating a plant, then you are executing the whole end-to-end testing around the whole process. Whereas your FICO, your ST, your SM, or your kind of MM module, all of that need to be tested. And if we have to do that every month, I mean, you can understand that how many resources you are pulling in just to do the kind of creating a company code within the SAP system, and then probably pulling a lot of people to do the testing. And it's not only limited to, I mean, when we look at the testing, it's not only limited to the building your test script and testing it, but the idea is like your test script with whatever has been built should be working into your unit testing, your SIT, your UAT, all those environments. Your test coverage is also important. Probably, I think we didn't show that feature, but I think in the studio you have a test coverage feature, whereas uh, uh, how your flow, I mean, you can have a variation from step number 3, whereas it can have like 2 different flows going from step number 3. And that segregation, if you don't provide the right data, you might miss out some of the part of your process, and then probably you are only testing 75% of process. So that's really important to kind of see those kind of things as well. Test data have become really challenging in the whole world of the testing. I mean, it's very difficult in the first question every customer asks, and that can also be solved with kind of the way UiPath has created some of the specific tool set to pull directly the master data using the data services or by some other mechanism, right? Test result, we have seen those in the test manager. You can look at it and validate it. Test evidence becomes also really critical whenever we are deploying any change on production that need to be validated, but you need to create a proof which will be submitted to the change management team. And the automation is very much capable of creating those test result into your predefined template, either in the Word document with all the screenshot, all the input and output, so that there's a very less manual work need to be done by either the business or the QA team in order to execute that, right? So I just want to cover that quickly. But I mean, there's a lot of benefit which our customer have seen, whereas a lot of reusability around the component, their process testing from 2 weeks to kind of change to like 2 hours in overall. And then they had 0% automation rate in that whole process, and they achieved approximately 90% automation because their test evidence and kind of test data, all of that were automated as part of this process. So there's a lot of benefit with kind of leveraging the right tool set into your mix. And I mean, last few slides I will cover around before we jump on the Q&A. But one more important thing is like, this is the one question being asked is, how do I set up my environment? How does my kind of tenant will look like on the testing side? And that is one of the critical questions. That's why like on the left-hand side, if you see that the products offer you to set up everything on the dev side, whereas the team is building the automations and they are validating it, then they are demoing it. But once they have finalized it, that, okay, this test script is final, that can be deployed into the QA tenant. So that way the QA tenant is always clean. And that's what you are executing with your business and testing your kind of enterprise application. So, and whenever there is a change, you can take back on the dev side, validate it, and then move it to QA, right? So very easy to manage and keeping your kind of tests clean, because testing is always going to be, I mean, it's a pretty huge. It's not like 10 script, 100 scripts. It can grow in thousands very easily. So it's very important to kind of define the right governance around it, and which is very beneficial. And last one quick demo I'll show you before I will jump on the question answer side. But this is like a quick overview around test manager, but I will not go through each detail of it. But what I'm trying to showcase here is once the tests are executed, you can see the results, which kind of provide you all the details logging by step that what the process executed and what is the screenshot look like, where is your details around the process look like, right? So all of that you can get. The other benefit is like there's always a happy path where your test successfully passed, then I mean it's all green. I mean you don't have to worry about. But what if your test fails? Then you need to create a bug or issue into your ALM system. And for example, if you're using Jira as an ALM system, somebody need to manually copy those information and create that into your ALM system, right? But with what UiPath has done is they have integrated the test manager with the majority of ALM system. I think it is more than 60 right now.
Yeah.
But the idea is in a single button click, you can synchronize the requirement from your ALM system to your test manager, and vice versa, whereas synchronize all the failures and the report the bugs and everything else from test manager to your ALM system. So test manager become your primary place for kind of a whole life cycle of the testing, right? And that's what we are showing here in a quick example, that this is where this was a failure case, whereas you can see that it failed, but there's a screenshot exists in this. And on a single button click, creating a task, it did create a task, and you can see that it did generate one quick link of the defect. And when I click that defect link, it will take me to the Jira, and I'll just pause it here. And you can see that all the information from test manager has been on a single button click and transitioned into the Jira. And it also attaches the screenshot of the failure, whereas what has failed and where it exactly has failed, right? You can see that it's a screenshot. So I'll just pause. I'll pause right here.
Quick time check, Amit. We got 3 minutes left, so didn't want to interrupt you there.
Thank you.
We do have a question from Sonali. I think it's specific to you, Amit, which is, the question is, workflows that were called in the main XML file showed in demo were placed in the same folder as main XAML. If yes, then how can we reuse them in any other end-to-end flow?
And I mean, maybe from my example, you might have seen it was like in one XML, but generally we break it down by the object. So that way one transaction code will be your one object, and that's where you increase the reusability.
Okay, great. So folks, this is a time where you can come off mute and ask a question. We've got about 3 minutes here or so please jump in and ask us any questions. So while they're formulating their question, Amit, my question for you is that this particular case study that you showed specifically for the customer, what were some of the big challenges that you came across? I'm assuming this was migration from ECC to S4 HANA. What were some of the key things that you saw early on from best practices perspective, or challenges that we need to keep in mind for SAP? Especially when you're migrating from ECC to HANA.
And I mean, certainly because there is a lot of, the biggest challenge was around, they wanted to make sure that their processes are intact. Plus, with the changes, whenever they are implementing, there's a lot of changes and flowing changes happens. And in order to adopt that, when we build those reusable components, it's always beneficial that, okay, if in your one transition code things changes, you're not changing the same thing into multiple scripts, and you are making change into one transaction workflow, and that can be reused everywhere else, right? So that's what the one big challenge from the testing team perspective. But from the business team perspective, that was like when they have to do a manual testing. I mean, I've seen in a scenario where a big hallway room with 50 plus people sitting and kind of doing testing for a week. So those kind of effort I've seen into not very big implementation, like it's like 8 months implementation cycle, but you can imagine like if you go bigger, what it would look like.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a good point. I've seen those myself too. So folks, again, 1 more minute here. You can unmute yourself. The unmute button is on the left bottom corner. All right, looks like we have a very shy crowd today. So with that, I want to thank you, everyone. I hope this was valuable for you. There was, I know, a lot of content to cover here. AI, PeopleSoft, SAP. I appreciate your time and look forward to our next session. Please, you can download the recording tomorrow. I believe Diana has posted the link. It will be available tomorrow. With that, have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Great session today, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.